welcome to part 2 of the video Modeling Best Practices, and this video is part of the series BPMN in Action. My name is Nele Uhlemann and I'm a developer advocate here at Camunda, and I would like to continue with the best practices in modeling. And in general, we had the idea to talk about modeling rules. That's something that we did in the first part, and today the second part will really focus on scopes, and we will see what different scopes exist and what happens if you mix different scopes. And the last part of this video will consist organizations, where we talk about what an organization can do to help to apply best practices. And if we talk about scopes, today I want to talk about the idea of what is internal to us as an organization and what is external. So where do we sometimes need input from someone external and how we can model it best. Also, I would like to have a look into strategic versus operational, and that really is a fine-grained view. In operational models, we have a really precise view on the process, and strategic gives us a good overview. And lastly, I would like to talk about the technical versus the human workflow, and that basically means that we also have the possibility with BPMN to display technical workflows, and that are normally the workflows that we automate. And also I will give you some information here. If we look into the first one, internal versus external, I often see the problem that people try to model external input as part of their organization, and that's normally a bad idea. So the real question here is, if we are an organization, who belongs to our organization and which processes can we really control? So what kind of work do we really know is happening, and how our maybe different departments are performing this? Also, if we have external parties, they are important for our process. That's not the question, but we need to model it rightly where we wait for the external input. And that really gives us then a good view of the interaction that we have with external parties, but also gives us indication what we can do, for example, as an organization if we miss external input. Okay, let's talk about the model that we had in the first video again. We had the restaurant example, and if we look into this one here, we have basically internal from the restaurant's perspective. We have the waiter, waitress, we have the bar and the kitchen, and who is really external is the customer. So that means inside the restaurant organization, I have basically the view, and I can see the real processes of the waiter, bar and kitchen, and I might have an idea that I need input from a customer, but I really cannot control the process of the customer because it's an external entity. Okay, I'm back here in the web modeler in the process, and we still see that we have here, it's quite far away, but we have the yellow pool, the customer. So we have a lot of tasks here that are belonging to the customer, and where the responsibility really relies within the customer, and I really would like to remove it, because also what we had here in the end was not nice. That's where we stopped, right? We had here in the restaurant process hunger satisfied, but that should be, or is a good indicator, this end event really is something for the customer, but not for us as a restaurant. Probably something like order handled would be nicer. So we can change that here to order handled, and then we have this clean table, but what was confusing is whenever we had this clean table or clean needed, that we also reached here with one token that says hunger satisfied, where this is really not the case for us as a restaurant, but it's more the order handled. We're also going to fix that, because just because we clean a table, also we haven't handled the full order. But I will connect with you shortly. Okay, this is like the overall structure, but let's look what I have changed. I changed all the inputs from our customer, the yellow one, to messages. So as an indicator, we wait here for something from an external party. And we can see that quite nicely here. At this point, we either wait for the bill or we wait for another order. I also changed that slightly around so that we are not asking after like bringing food and drinks all the time, but we really wait here as a waiter, either that the customer says, hey, I want to pay, or hey, I want to order something new. Also, I changed this one a little bit with a clean table. So now we have here Parallel Gateway that will throw the link event. Yeah, we catch the link event here basically, then we clean the table, and we have a different end event here that is an indicator. How many times did we clean the table for one customer? So how many times did we reach the end event? Also, what we can see here is that from the perspective of a restaurant, we have a good end event that says order handled now. And also here at the start event, we have something that is called order received. And yeah, that already gives us good indication and makes the process more clear, because now we see where we really wait for internal or external input and where we can do things as an organization. And that's already, yeah, I would say a tidied up view of the process model. And that's one thing that we can do to improve, really to ask ourselves, who is internal, who is external, where do we really need to wait for input, and what can we control in the process ourselves. I'm still not super satisfied with this model because it still mixes some things. Let's have a look into the next chapter. The next thing I would like to mention is the scope of being strategic or operational in your process model. And yeah, what is the difference? Basically, if we have a strategic process model, we want to have an overview. So we have the bird's eye view here, and that's the only way, or that's the only scope where I say maybe it's okay to use lanes. Also, we just want to have 10 tasks, not more. So we really want to give the reader a good overview of like just what's going on, but not like in that much detail. And and on an operational view, what we have is we really want the fine-grained view. So we want to outline the communication. That means basically want to give every participant in the process an own expanded tool where we can really see what's going on. We want to see the interfaces with message flows, and we want to be we want to see every detail, and we want to really understand what's going on in the different departments, what is going on with the different responsibilities in the process. And that normally leads to bigger collaboration diagrams, where the first one leads to a single diagram with a pool. To our example model, we stopped here, we removed the customer, but now I would like to give you an indication why this is a mix between a strategic and an operational model. First of all, we have there's still going on a lot, and if I zoom in here, I can see actually I have a task called prepare drinks, and then in more detailed description it says what the person has to do, like use the coffee machine, fill drink into cup, and so on and so forth. And this is an indication that maybe the detail level here is maybe a little bit too much for a strategic view, but what speaks for us to be this what says this model could be a strategic view is that I really just have one pool here. I have just one pool, and a lot of things are going on in that pool. And let's change that a little bit to a model where we can see what strategic means and how I would apply a strategic model. Okay, perfect. Now I'm quite happy with this as a strategic process model. What did I really do? I removed, first of all, the collapsed pools with the roles because I don't need them anymore. I reintroduced lanes, also well, already you know that I don't like them that much, but I think in a strategic model it is really okay to use lanes. I also removed some of the complexity of the process, so we don't see the whole idea of clean the table anymore in this process, because from a strategic point of view that is too much detail already. I just want to give a quick overview who is participant in this process, which different departments, and in this case we know now, because of pool and lanes, bar, waiter, waitress and chef. We see mainly some tasks they have to perform, but not in detail. So we have here prepare drinks and prepare food, but we don't see what that really means in detail. And then we see what the waiter is doing, waiting here. We still see that the customer is here for the external input where we wait for, and we see that we end the process if the order is handled. And really the idea is just that we understand now briefly who is responsible in this process and who needs to perform a task. But we don't see communication here at the moment, and we also don't see how people interact with each other. And that's part of the strategic process model, that we don't see that. I'm talking in the next part about the operational process model, and let's see how we can outline communication and interfaces in the operational process. Okay, I'm back to the initial model that we had before we changed it to a strategic one. And I want to show what I would do if I would now take this one here to an operational process model, because I told you we have the mix here, right? So in the first part, I reduced complexity and made it a strategic process model. And in this part, I show you how how the operational process model probably would look like. Okay, I zoom out, and this is something, what did I do here for the operational model? First of all, the customer stays a collapsed pool, but the other parties, they become expanded pools, and I'm doing that because now I can really outline the communication between the parties. I moved the task to the representative pools, and then I connected them using message flows. And now also what becomes really clear is how is this restaurant working? So what are the communication flows? We see here that we have to send the order to the bar. So they have to communicate. The waiter or the waitress has to communicate with the bar and the kitchen. And also what's happening here is that the kitchen really informs the waiter and the waitress. So the idea here is if we move the things to operational process models, we can also see inside our organization what are the communication flows and who is communicating with whom, what are the interfaces of communication. I also have the fine-grained process here for the barkeeper. So what you could imagine now is if you have that restaurant and you want to onboard a new barkeeper, you could show them that diagram and tell them this is how you work. You wait here until you receive an information from the waiter waitress, and then you start preparing drinks. And it depends what type of drinks you have. If you have a warm drink, if you have a cocktail, if you have a cold drink, you do different things, right? So here you have a multiple choice, so to say. If you have a warm drink and a cocktail, you have to use a coffee machine, you have to mix the drinks, and so on and so forth. You place the drinks for pickup, and after you place the drinks, you also have to talk again to the waiter. And this is basically the idea that we really can show now how a single department has to work. We are more detailed than the bird's eye view, but we have really clear instructions what the single people are doing. And this leads to the collaboration diagram I was talking about. So we have multiple pools collaborating with message flows. Let's have in the next section a look what we can do if we also have technical components included in our process model. Okay, what we did in the last part is actually this. We gave every entity in our organization an own pool, so the waiter, waitress, bar and kitchen, and the customer stayed in collapsed pool. But that way we could really model the interaction between those parties and the communication that's going on. A really good way to remember the scopes is the Camunda house that you find in the BPMN Praxis handbook. And you can see here again the first part where we modeled the strategic process model, the one pool with the lanes, where we have the quick overview. And it doesn't need to map one-to-one to the operational process model. That is important to understand because the operational process model will have more details. And that's what we just did. We modeled the human workflow on an operational level, and now what we also want to look at is actually the technical workflow. And what does technical workflow mean? It normally means we have some systems or things in our company we interact with, and the humans also interact with that. And we really want to show that how the interaction here works, and also how the automation of our processes looks like. And what we do in our example now is, here again, the overview, so the human flow describes how the departments work, and normally we don't need task types here. And the technical flow really describes the work of the systems, and task types here are needed because a workflow engine, for example, needs to know who will perform certain tasks. And for our example, what we are going to do is now we will have a component, or we will assume that our restaurant is not just working manually, but we have a restaurant system here, and we also model the flow of the restaurant system. And the really nice thing with BPMN is that we are not just modeling it, but we could also then just execute it. And then we have the real power here of process automation and BPMN 2.0 if we start thinking about automating our processes. So I'm back here where we left, and now it's getting a little bit interesting. Let's change that to a component, because we have here actually the thing enter order into system. And this could mean now multiple things, but let's move that to something where we see how a system could interact also now with the other parties. Okay, I changed the model again slightly. So what we see here now is what happens if we introduce actually a technical workflow. That means a system here, and then we can also show the system integration. And now I look into this one here, and actually we start triggering the restaurant system whenever our waiter enters the thing into the system. And then what the system is doing, it takes over the communication logic. So the parties, like the waiter, is not communicating anymore with the bar and the chef. The system is doing that. So you could imagine probably that in the kitchen and at the bar there is a display telling them, oh, we received an order. And then the process is still the same. The only thing is they now confirm here food is ready, probably by pressing a button into the system or at the system and say, okay, the food is ready. Information is sent to our waiter with drinks and food. And also we have some more logic now in the system, because once both tokens are here, we might want to reduce the stock of our ingredients in our ERP system. We create a bill, and we also add the information to our finance system. And this gives us more chance, that gives us an indicator what does it really mean to automate, for example, the business of a restaurant. And now we really have a view what that also means for the humans to interact with the system, but also what the system looks like. And the real benefit actually with BPMN is to think about this technical process flow and think about the automation that you can do with it. And sometimes what I see as an anti-pattern is that people try to put in information about the technical process flow and the human workflow in one diagram or like in one pool. And that's normally not working. So you really have to separate like we did here and this one. And you could also now think about further processes. You could model them more accurate actually, because do we really need the customer to interact with our waiter? So if you think about like those ordering counters that you see at certain fast food restaurants, here actually our waiter does not really need to interact with the customer anymore. So this could be modeled now as well, and the system could be modeled as well if you like. So if you would like to give it a try, do it and let me know how it goes, because that brings me basically to the end of this second part of best practices when we talked about scopes. And I hope you saw today it's important to understand which scope you are modeling, and that mixing scopes with each other normally is not a good idea and leads to process models that are more complex and not accurate in what they want to express. So hope to see you the next time.